I'm here with Chief Strategist James Vowles to analyse the Australian Grand Prix. So James, on lap 17 is when things really start to get interesting, exciting. Why did you decide to pit Lewis at that point?
Lap 17 had been a really close-fought race between us and Vettel all the way to that point. If you go over here to the fastest lap plot, it describes it very well. Slow track to start, that's normal for Melbourne. And then we started to push, Vettel responded. We started to push, Vettel responded. And around about lap 8, we told Lewis, right, let's get the hammer down, let's see if we can really build this gap relative to Vettel now. And Vettel responded straight away. In fact, what ended up happening is we started to see a little bit of degradation on tyres, and Vettel came back into our window. So this became a critical point in the race. We know Ferrari are as fast as us now. And the question then becomes, what do we have to do to try and still maintain the win or the lead of this race? If we stop, we knew we were going to drop out behind Kimi and Verstappen. But if we're suffering degradation, they should start to see a little bit as well at that point in time. We're not going to be able to overtake in all likelihood against these cars. But there's an interesting circumstance that appears. If we stop, Verstappen has an opportunity to beat Kimi into P4. The reason why? Ferrari have to keep Kimi out, which means if Verstappen stops and there's a little gap behind him around about lap 20 appearing, that gives us free air to push back up to the back of Kimi, and maybe that will create the circumstance we need in order to win this race. So very difficult decision. In the end, I decided to go for it. I believed Verstappen would stop. He didn't in the end, and you saw what happened. 0.6 of a second, that was all that separated us and Vettel coming out the pits. Very, very close racing. If Verstappen had stopped just one lap before, we would have still won that race. So very interesting circumstance that didn't go away on that particular occasion.
We're now on lap 23, post-pit stop. What other decisions could you make from that point onwards?
So Vettel's now ahead of us on the track. Obviously we still have Kimi and Verstappen yet to stop behind. So Valtteri's still in a good position in the race for the podium in P3. Our decisions here are, what is our pace really relative to Vettel? Can we catch back up, or can we even try something a little bit out there, plan B? Plan B for us at this particular race was a two-stop. We're going to have a look to see if we could find other opportunities later on in the race, or to maximise safety cars. Melbourne, normally last year we had 3 safety car laps. It's a high probability of a safety car, and you want to try and maximise your opportunities. So continuously the way through, we were asking Lewis to push, to catch back up, to see if we could really get within range to try something different. Plan B wasn't going to work, however, due to the nature of still Kimi and Verstappen. They never created the gap big enough for us to be able to use to come into. So unfortunately from that point onwards, it was one stop all the way to the end of the race.
So looking at Valtteri's race now, he ended up putting in some very good laps towards the end, and he was actually catching Lewis. How would you rate his race overall? Brilliant.
For his first race out with the team, we're very, very impressed with him. In qualifying, you saw he was a couple of tenths shy of where Lewis was, but he did a very solid job in the race. We were trying to get him to build a gap relative to Kimi. He did that for us in that ultra-soft stint at the beginning of the race. He didn't quite have the pace to catch up with Lewis and Vettel, but he did a solid race. He kept the tyres alive, and you see we took him all the way to lap 25 before we came in and changed the soft tyres. He allowed me to make sure we covered the risk of safety cars in that range of 17 to 25 where Lewis had already pitted, and he kept the tyres alive for a good period of time. On the soft, he did an even better job. You saw he caught back up to the back of Lewis. Lewis had a little bit of traffic with Verstappen on the outlap, which caused him to lose a little bit more tyre performance. But Valtteri really just able to sit there with Lewis and fight him to the end of the race. Great job.
So we're now looking at the end of the race, of the first 2017 race with new tyres, wider cars. How did this impact your race?
I mean, from my perspective, I think the rules have been a huge success. The cars are harder to drive, they're much faster. We're setting really fast lap times, both in race and in qualifying. And for us as a team, everything's different to what it was last year. You have to relearn the car, relearn the tyres, as does every other team. And as you saw, you're never quite sure where you are. Sometimes Ferrari a little bit ahead, sometimes we were a little bit ahead, and that's great. That's what the whole point of Formula One racing is. It's the best man wins on the day in that circumstance. Overtakes. We only had 14 overtakes, 3 with DRS. That's not a lot, but it's Melbourne. There's never a lot at Melbourne. Very difficult track to get past. And I wouldn't use that as a baseline for what's going to happen this year. I'm confident Shanghai and Bahrain, we will see overtaking. We're going to see some spectacular moves and some proper racing. It's just Melbourne's a bit of an outlier in terms of how it's categorised. In terms of other learning, the tyres. Very interesting. Pirelli's done a good job. You can push on them. You can really work with the tyres now. And it's going to be interesting to see how that develops across the year.